Sugar, 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 and well, more sugar. All right, guys, I'm going to talk to you today about the sugar diet, what it is, and guess what? I did it for 3 days. That actually happened. So I want to kind of walk you through what I did, why I did it. I want to explain the mechanism behind it, etc. So I know you heard about it, right? It's all the rave right now. Some love it, others hate it. And I've been listening back in these back and forths, and one influencer, a prominent one that's really promoting this, made a really valid point. He said, so many people that are knocking this have not tried it. Fair point, my friend. Fair point indeed. So, while I'm an individual, I have my own will, I have my own merits. I said, you know what? I'll take you on. So I tried it, and today we're going to talk about it. Now, this is not encouraging this. This is not discouraging this. This is simply me going, I'll try it. I'll give my honest feedback. Before we get into it, I kind of want to talk about more about what the sugar diet is, okay? So the sugar diet is not, this is important, it is not a standard American diet, right? A lot of people say that, oh, this is just like how you used to eat. You're going to get fat on this. It's not a standard American diet, right? This diet is not full of cinnamon rolls and cheeseburgers and ho-hos and all of that stuff, right? It's not a cheeseburger with fries and a milkshake. This diet aims to almost completely eliminate fat from your diet and tightly control protein, keeping protein ultra low, just enough that you need and no more, right? And then you guessed it, a crap ton of sugar, right? This comes from low-fiber fruits, honey, maple syrup, and if you're feeling very frisky, zero-fat candy, Skittles, Nerds, Starburst, that kind of stuff, right? It's also important to know that this is a weight loss diet. I do not recommend this for over 30 days. I don't think anybody else does either. When we talk about muscle prevention, we know clinically that people can undereat their protein threshold for up to 30 days and not lose significant lean mass. I would not do this longer than that if you plan on doing it, but that's what most people encourage, so that's good at least. Okay, so let's talk about the mechanisms, right? Why does this diet possibly work, right? So there's four big ones. There's four key factors at play, okay? So first is calories. Let's face it, right? Carbs account for 4 calories per gram, fat accounts for 9 calories per gram, and protein accounts for 4 calories per gram. So for example, let's say that you stick to, they recommend about 80 grams of protein per day on this diet, preferably at the end of the day. Let's say that you hit that and you keep your carbs around 20, right? We want to keep it as close to zero as possible. Let's just give you some space, a little cream in your coffee, that kind of stuff. And let's give you 20 grams. That's only 500 calories a day. 20 grams of fat, 80 grams of protein. You would have to eat north of 300 grams of carbs to get over 1,700 calories at that point. 1,700, okay? Now, you might hear and go, well, I used to do that all the time. I eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's and be at 300 grams. Can't eat Ben & Jerry's on this diet. I'm telling you, as someone that just did this, eating 300 grams of carbs, of fruit, honey, and maple syrup is very difficult. It is very difficult indeed, okay? So I'm going to distract my child right here while I talk to y'all. I knew she was going to come in here while I was doing this. To put that in perspective, 300 grams of carbs of those sources of carbohydrates is like 2 cups of raw honey. Now, you may, in your ignorance, think that that sounds easy. It is not, okay? That is 25 cups of strawberries. That is more than you think it is. And as someone that did this diet, the foods get old in that way. Like you don't want to keep eating once you're full. It's not attractive, which is interesting. But it's a lot of carbs is my point. It's really easy to keep calories low, which is why some people will notice weight loss, fat loss on this diet. Secondly is cortisol suppression. Now, something y'all know, I have talked about this again and again and again, how especially women can get benefits from adding carbs if they've been on a long-term ketogenic carnivore diet. Why? Because carbs elicit insulin responses. Insulin has a direct inverted relationship with cortisol, okay? So people with cortisol dysregulation, adrenal dysregulation, they will notice benefits. And you see this in the comments. You go to the comments and you'll see mainly women, but some men say, oh my gosh, I've been on this diet for 4 days. I feel more relaxed. I'm sleeping better than I ever did on keto, blah, blah, blah. It's just introduction to carbohydrates. Now, this is that on steroids, but it's not surprising to me because of the hormonal mechanisms that could be a benefit, at least in the short term, and why people are attracted to the diet. Thirdly is a hormone known as FGF21. Now, there is a study done on this looking at minimizing protein intake which increases this hormone, which allows for increased insulin sensitivity. Now, some might argue, well, then why don't you just keep protein low and say increase fat? Why increase sugar? Because if you're more insulin sensitive, it makes sense to use more sugar, especially because we know higher intakes of stearic acid can lead to insulin resistance. This is also in the clinical literature. That doesn't mean stearic acid is bad, because stearic acid can help with fatty acid oxidation and fatty acid usage. But it's something to note, right? Like if you're going to be using a diet that the intention is to increase insulin sensitivity, why would you not use glucose, right? So that's another one. Fourthly, it's abundant energy, right? Sugar is quick energy. We know this. That's why when you get stressed out, your body raises blood sugar, not ketones. It's quick. It wants something quick to get away from the tiger, to get away from the stress, whatever that may be. When you're very active, which if you have a lot of energy, you should want to move more, your body will use these carbs for immediate energy and then glycogen replenishment. These carbs are less likely to be stored as fat, and they also make you move more, which upregulates metabolism. The FGF hormone also upregulates metabolic functioning because of the insulin sensitivity. So basically the idea is you turn into this fat burning machine on this diet, right? Those are the four mechanisms that people will lean towards, or that I can actually see clinically, that kind of makes sense and why this approach could be attractive to some. And then let's just get the obvious out of the way. Who doesn't want to know they can eat an entire bag of Skittles and lose weight, right? Like everybody loves that. Okay, so how did this diet play out for me? Right, so as you should know, I'm not an advocate for candy. I didn't eat candy on this diet. It's just not something I want to do. Not just because I don't like the high fructose corn syrup. I also don't like the food dyes. I don't like the red dye 40 and the yellow 5 and da-da-da-da. So I stuck to fruits, honey, maple syrup. Now, some could argue I had too much fruit and that could have impacted the results I'm about to go over. But that's just all hearsay. I never walked or backed out of I never broke the parameters of the diet, is what I'm trying to say. So what did my diet look like? So for 3 days, morning till evening, so when I woke up until I ate dinner, I would have fruit, honey, and maple syrup. Bananas with strawberries and honey poured all over it, whatever. And then at dinner, I'd have 80 grams of protein from chicken breast, right? My fats usually were between 15 to 30 grams a day, never over 30. Super simple, nothing crazy. And again, some people could argue I had too much fruit because I wasn't like snorting Starburst, but whatever. So first, let's talk about body composition. So I don't have it on the screen because I'm not being fancy with this video. I'm going to read it to you. So I use the Hume Body Pod for this. I measured myself every day. I found this thing to be relatively accurate as far as body scanners go, especially at home ones. I'm not sponsored by them. I just use them. I did not notice significant change. In the 3 days, my body weight went from 192 to 191.8. Body fat percentage went from 12.0 to 12.1. Lean mass went from 161.6 to 161.0. These are negligible changes on a body scan. Basically, what I'm trying to say is nothing happened. Literally, I didn't get better. I didn't get worse. Nothing happened. And I know it's important to state that because the control is, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second. Prior to the sugar experiment, I was on a normal low-carb cutting phase for my competition prep, and I lost 5 pounds the first week, and then I proceeded to lose another 3 pounds when I got back on my diet after this fast. So the only time I didn't see progress in the 3 weeks that I've been dieting is the 3 days that I was on this sugar fast. And again, that doesn't mean it doesn't work for other people. It's just that was my experience. That is something that I noted. So from a body composition place, nothing happened, okay? So I want to break this down to pros and cons. I'll give the devil its due, and we'll start with pros. Okay, so the first pro, it was really, really easy to eat, right? Fruit is everywhere, and if you're willing to take on candy, even more so. You can be out in the middle of nowhere. You can be in an airport. You can be on the plane. You have access to fruit juices, fruits. If you're feeling really frisky, Coke, candy. People be doing that on this. It's really easy. You're never going to lack. There's always the foods that you're allowed to eat accessible to you. Not all diets are like that. Some people have to like take pieces of chicken breast or like cold steaks with them in their lunchbox when they're on carnivore, etc. So in terms of accessibility, this diet is by far the most accessible just because of the way that Americans are. Secondly, it's really easy to stay low calorie. Again, I ate like a madman on this diet. I ate a lot. I was eating like half a watermelon a day, and I only broke 2,000 calories once. And right now, my calories are around 2,200. Now, we'll get into the con of that in a second, but my point is like, it was really hard to overeat. In fact, I didn't. The third one, there was constant energy. Now, there's a caveat to this, which I'll get into in a second. But the reality is that my workouts did not lack. I always had energy. My runs went great. Performance-wise, I didn't notice any negative impact, which is a pro. That's a pro, right? I can't get around that. All right, let's talk about cons. Again, no weight loss. That's the first big one. Nothing changed. I was even eating under my calorie requirements every day, and I still didn't lose any body fat. I don't like that. That doesn't make sense to me. My body just doesn't respond well to this diet. Now, some could argue that I didn't stay on the diet long enough, but I would say that one of the things that makes this diet so popular on social media right now is that people are saying they're losing 4 pounds and they're getting lean within the first week, the first 3 or 4 days. So if that's the thing that's promoting this and encouraging people to do it, I did not see that. And so that would be the first con. The second con is you have to eat all the time, right? So that caveat going back to constant energy, I had constant energy because I was eating all the time. Because one thing I did notice about this diet is it doesn't really encourage metabolic flexibility, okay? It really encourages sugar dominance, which we could talk about the pros and cons of that in another video, but it really does. And I noticed that like my body did not want to just sit on body fat. It didn't want to just, like normally when I'm eating a low carb diet, a ketogenic diet, or even like 100 grams of carbs from like what I typically do, I notice that I can go hours without eating. I can go 5, 6, 7. I can go a while without eating. My body's totally fine. It's totally metabolically flexible to lean on fat stores. That was not the experience with this. I had to eat all the time if I wanted to stay afloat. So that was a con. Third was digestion. This was the big one. This is one reason I didn't keep doing it. I might have done it a whole week if this problem didn't arise. But about halfway into the second day, I started to have bad gut distress. I started having constant gas. I started to have the runs. And I don't like a diet where I can't trust my shorts leaving the house. And that's what was happening. Now, some could argue it's because I was focusing a lot on fruit, and we can have that discussion. But I just didn't like that. That was just a con that I noticed. So overall, I was not impressed with this diet. I think that just like when carnivore got super hot, like the Lions diet, it was a way to promote not having to track. That's a big thing with this. Not having to track your calories, focusing on simple choices and foods that people love. Whether it's, beefy patties with butter and cheese, or it's a bag of Skittles. People want an excuse to eat both in abundance without having to give it a second thought. They want to be able to lose weight effortlessly. Those key words are what are being thrown around, and therefore it's gaining traction with people that are frustrated. But like I've always said, focusing on a good amount of fats in your diet, your ideal body weight and protein at the minimum, and a moderate amount of carbs or low carbs from whole food sources. If you focus on those things within a calorie amount that you need, and you give yourself time, you will lose the weight and you will get in a healthy place. So I think I'm not going to call it a fad. It kind of is a fad. It works for some people. And again, if it works for you, and I might get comments like, I tried it and I love it. That's great. That was not my experience. I don't think that most people need to be doing this, just like I don't think most people need to be doing a strict carnivore diet. So where I could see it maybe coming in handy is like if you're really craving glucose and you just want a day where you just want to eat a bunch of fruit and you don't want to think about it, you could take a day off from tracking and literally just cut all the fat and protein out of your diet and have like just fruit all day, scratch that itch if you can get back on your diet the next day. I could see it possibly being a benefit in that way. But other than that, I really didn't see that it's worth it for me. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the sugar diet. I'm writing a blog on it. I will have that posted on theketoroad.com, and I appreciate y'all tuning in.